In our last episode, we watched Elizabeth Báthory open her gymnasium, a finishing school for noble girls that became a slaughterhouse. We heard the testimonies of noble mothers who sent daughters to Elizabeth's court and received, in return, only grief. We heard about the girl who escaped with a knife in her foot. And we began to understand that the walls of silence protecting Elizabeth Báthory for decades were finally beginning to fall. Today, the walls come down completely. The year is 1610. King Matthias II of Hungary had been receiving complaints about Elizabeth Báthory for years. A Lutheran minister named István Magyari had been making noise about her crimes since 1602. The complaints had been growing, not shrinking, and now, with the daughters of noblemen among the missing and the dead, the king could no longer afford to look away. In 1610, King Matthias assigned Georg Thurzo, the Palatine of Hungary, to investigate Elizabeth Báthory. Thurzo appointed two notaries, András Keresztúri and Moses Zaraki. Their job was simple and terrible: go into the villages, the towns, the churches, and the courts of Hungary, and collect testimony. Find everyone who knew something. Write it all down. They began in March of 1610. By October, they had 52 witness statements. By 1611, the number had surpassed 300. 300 witnesses, 300 voices, speaking from across an entire kingdom, all telling variations of the same story. A powerful countess, a castle, girls who went in, and did not come out. The testimonies were not the ravings of hysterical peasants. They were sworn statements from men and women of all social classes. Noblemen, castellans, clergymen, servants, and ordinary citizens who had seen things they could not forget. Thomas Nyeriharto testified about a girl with destroyed tendons and torn flesh. Martinus Chanady testified about a man who begged to see his sister and found her barely able to lift her trembling hands, weeping with pain. A sister who then died in Elizabeth's custody. Janos Deseo, the warden, testified that Elizabeth told him plainly that she would kill his niece. And she did. But here is where the story becomes complicated. Here is where we must put on a different pair of eyes and look at what was happening not just in the castle, but in the courts of power around it. Elizabeth Báthory was wealthy, extraordinarily so. After her husband's death, her landholdings had increased significantly. She controlled vast territories in the Kingdom of Hungary, and King Matthias owed her estate a very large debt. Under the law of the time, if Elizabeth was convicted and sentenced to death, her property would pass to the crown. The king's debt would be cancelled. Some scholars have argued that what happened to Elizabeth Báthory was not justice. It was theft, that the accusations were amplified, or even partially manufactured, to destroy her family's influence and seize her wealth. Her nephew, Prince Gabor Bathory, ruled in Transylvania. He was involved in a movement for Hungarian independence from Habsburg rule, a direct threat to King Matthias's power. The investigator, Georg Thurzo, had actually been involved in an assassination attempt on Prince Gabor. He had political ambitions for his own son to become Prince of Transylvania. In direct competition with Elizabeth's line, the Bathorys were Calvinists, the Habsburgs were Catholic. Religious tension ran deep. Thurzo, it has been argued, stood to gain enormously from Elizabeth's disgrace. And yet, over 300 people testified. People who were not tortured. People who gave first-hand accounts. People who had seen the wounds with their own eyes. Who had watched girls die. Who had begged for sisters and nieces to be returned, and been refused. The truth of this story is not clean. It never has been. But something monstrous happened inside those castles. The debate is not about whether girls died. It is about how many, and whether the full weight of those deaths belongs to Elizabeth alone. On New Year's Eve, 1610, Georg Thurzo made his move. He rode to Castle Csejte, unannounced, with soldiers. What he found, he would later describe in letters to King Matthias and to his own wife. Letters that have survived to this day. According to Thurzo's letter, when he entered the castle, he found one dead girl and another living girl still inside. The official story, the one that spread through Hungary in the days that followed, was that Thurzo had found Bathory caught in the act. Covered in blood, red-handed, but scholars who have examined the evidence carefully note something important. Elizabeth Báthory was not found torturing anyone. She was having dinner. The dramatic story of discovery, the blood, the act, the moment of horror, appears to have been embellished in the retelling. What is certain is this. On that New Year's Eve, Elizabeth Báthory was arrested, along with 4 of her servants, Dorotea Sentes, Ilona Jo, Katerina Benica, and Janos Ujvari, Fico, after years of crimes, after decades of silence, after hundreds of victims whose names were never written in any history book. Elizabeth Báthory was finally in custody. After her arrest, in a conversation with the clerics who came to speak with her, Elizabeth Báthory was asked a direct question. Pastor Barasius looked at her and asked, "Why did you not stop your accomplices? Why did you not intervene? Why did you not end it?" Elizabeth Báthory looked back at him and said, "I did it, because even I myself was afraid of them." She was blaming her accomplices. She was attempting to redirect the guilt. She was trying to make herself the victim of the very people who served her. This statement was not extracted under torture. It was given freely, in conversation. It was recorded and preserved. It is the closest thing we have to Elizabeth Báthory's own voice in this story. And even in that voice, in that single sentence, we can hear the calculating mind of a woman who had spent decades surviving by controlling the narrative around her. It did not work this time. 2 trials were held in the wake of Elizabeth's arrest. The first, on the 2nd of January, 1611. The second, on the 7th of January, 1611. In the first trial, 17 witnesses testified, including the 4 servants who were also on trial as her accomplices. Those servants had been tortured before the proceedings began. Their confessions, therefore, carry a shadow of doubt. But those servant confessions were not the only evidence. The first-hand witnesses, the ones who had not been tortured, gave their testimonies freely. The verdict came swiftly. The accomplices were condemned to death. Ilona Jo and Dorotea Sentes, the 2 women who had been at Elizabeth's side through the worst of it, were sentenced to a death designed to match the horror of what they had done. Their fingers were torn out one by one with red-hot pincers. Then they were burned alive. Janos Ujvari, Fico, was judged to have been less culpable. He was beheaded. His body was burned on the same pyre as the women. Erzima Yurova had initially escaped. She was later captured. She was burned alive. Only Katerina Benica was spared execution. Evidence suggested she had herself been abused by the other accomplices. She received a life sentence. 4 people died for what happened in those castles. But the woman at the center of it all, the woman whose name was on every complaint, in every letter, in every testimony, was not among them. Because Elizabeth Báthory was nobility, and in the Kingdom of Hungary in 1611, a formal death sentence against a noblewoman of her standing required legal conditions that Thurzo and the king could not, or would not, fully satisfy. King Matthias wanted her dead. He wrote letters demanding it. He was furious that the death penalty was not being pursued, but the law of the kingdom was complicated, and Thurzo, who had his own reasons for keeping the Bathory family's disgrace as quiet as possible, chose a different path. What happened to Elizabeth Báthory instead of execution is one of the strangest, most haunting endings to any story in the history of European crime. Join us in episode 5, the final episode of this series, where we witness Elizabeth's last years, her confinement, her final night, and the question that has never been fully answered. Where is Elizabeth Báthory buried?